It's been rumoured for a while, but now it has finally been confirmed. From 2026, Madrid will host the Spanish Grand Prix under a new 10-year contract. Subject to FIA approval, the circuit is set to be a hybrid track with both street and non-street sections, 20 corners and a predicted lap time of around 1 minute 32 seconds. But with Barcelona having been the home of the Spanish Grand Prix for over 3 decades, what does the future hold for the Circuit de Barcelona-Catalunya? And will it be a repeat of Formula One's previous Valencia debacle? I'm Sam Hall, and joining me today in the Spanish Inquisition is Jon Noble. Welcome. Now, let's start off with the Madrid circuit itself. As we've said, the track is still subject to FIA approval, but we've seen the proposed layout already. Some people may lament it being another street circuit on the calendar, but what are the characteristics of the street layout, and is there anything interesting going on here?
Yeah, so I think it's always quite difficult with tracks to judge them based purely on a kind of elevated map. I mean, if you think of perhaps the most iconic corner in Formula One, Eau Rouge, looks nothing on a overhead aerial shot, but we know what it's exactly like, and it's a bit like Austin. You could think some of that layout looks a bit Mickey Mouse, and it's got some fantastic elements based on elevation and the way they all flow into each other. So I think we're still in quite an early stage of the development of the Madrid map. We've heard some comments from Craig Wilson this morning, who head of kind of circuit development for Formula One. There are some interesting elements. Some there's looking at potential for a banked corner, which obviously we've seen put to good use in Zandvoort. I think they're going to be running through 2 lots of tunnels where it goes under a motorway, which I think will look fantastic. Potentially the first kind of twin tunnel track, if you want to call it. And I think a lot will depend on the width of the roads, because I think, street circuits can be made or defeated basically by how wide it is. If there's no place to pass, no potential opportunity to dive down the inside, it can be terrible. And we see elements like Baku first section looks really Mickey Mouse, 90-degree corners, but actually has produced some decent overtaking incidents. And then you see 90-degree corners like we had in Sochi, for example, that were terrible because there wasn't enough kind of variation of speed. So I think it's one of those that it's evolving, it's changing. Doesn't look fantastic from the overhead shot, but I think we've got to see how it evolves and develops before we can give it a proper judge, I think.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. It doesn't look fantastic from the overhead shot, but we'll see. All tracks always look different when you get cars on them. Stefano Domenicali said that it's a great location geographically, and it will boast a capacity of 110,000 in 2026, moving up to 140,000, which would rival Melbourne, Kota and Silverstone. Sustainability is also high on the agenda. Why are these points also important to F1's Madrid circuit?
Well, sustainability is, every company in the world having to think about it. It's something that cannot be ignored. And it's something F1 especially is pushing very, very hard on. Its net zero target for 2030. I think if you're going to keep, as an ecosystem for Formula One, to keep sponsors, to keep manufacturers interested, it can't go off down a V10 route and ignore kind of the environment and the climate change and all those issues. So it's got to be hand in hand with the companies that ultimately fund it. And this is why sustainability is important. Now, you can argue that why is building a brand new track in the middle of a city more sustainable than enhancing Barcelona, which I know there's a study done by a company called Innovation that analyzes every single race circuit in the world to look at their sustainability credentials. And Barcelona has been, I think, was number 1 in 22, made big improvements, was number 2 last year behind Mugello. So it is a very sustainable track, and a lot's been done there. So, but I think one of the issues, and I think we always go back to that, one of the most polluting sporting events in the world is the Tour de France, which is, you think, why are a couple of hundred bikes so bad for the environment? It's all about spectators, getting spectators to and from venues. So I think the model of Zandvoort, where 95 in the high 90s percentage of people go on public transport or bikes, and I think the aim will be the same in Madrid. So it's not people getting in cars and driving to the circuit. So I think this is one of the key attractions for it. A key attraction as well being in a city. So you've got this huge nearby fan base, which has proved the successful models for places like Austin, Montreal, Melbourne. But I think the key thing is we have to be mindful about F1's current boom is based on the success of Fernando Alonso and Carlos Sainz. By the time we get to 26, is Fernando going to be around? I mean, I wouldn't rule it out because I think he's someone who would want to race on in Formula One forever. But if Sainz isn't Sainz should be there, but if Sainz isn't at the front, if he stays at Ferrari and it's not gone well, or he's gone to say Audi, for example, who are having a difficult start to their Formula One, then will the Spanish interest be enough to drive that crowd there? I think these are the key things, because we're talking a few years down the road.
Yeah, looking at that, it's interesting that it's been a 10-year contract announced, because that does give an element of stability to Madrid for a decade. Only Bahrain's current contract finishes later in the road. What does this decade-long contract say for F1's future hopes, and is it all pinned on, really, Carlos Sainz? Because as you said, Fernando Alonso isn't long for the sport, if we're entirely honest.
I think 10 years is more about where F1 sees its business and the commercial aspects of where it's going. I think Formula One for a long time had these 5-year deals that would roll on, and it became a constant negotiation and battle. And I think it's in F1's interest. It's got shares, it's got shareholders, it's got investors, it's got an owner in Liberty Media, and long-term deals are good. It's a guaranteed income for the long term. It gives shareholders some confidence that it's sustainable. It also embarks a new era of Formula One from 26. So anything we get from 26 onwards is great news for shareholders, and it kind of shores up F1's position as we go into Concord negotiations, which are always an interesting time for the battleground of who gets what money and where it's divided up between the teams, FOM, FIA. I think Stefano Domenicali today said, the trend now will be for long-term deals, that they want to get this calendar settled and sorted and make big plans for the long term, rather than having these short deals that can endlessly complicate things and aren't necessarily the best thing to have as you're planning a decent kind of shareholder confidence in where things are going.
That's definitely interesting, given the long list that we frequently hear about of other countries and tracks that are interested in bringing Formula One to them. I guess we can move on to the elephant in the room, really, and that's Barcelona. In recent years, it's gone from hosting the Spanish Grand Prix and pre-season testing to just the Grand Prix, and now neither. Does this spell doom for Barcelona in Formula One, or are there other options available? Because pre-season testing, really, the weather's too cold, and Formula One has its home for that in Bahrain now.
Yeah, I think Bahrain's become the home of pre-season testing. I think there are commercial factors at play, shall we say, in why F1 goes to Bahrain, and Bahrain likes having the test. It likes having the first race there, and it works for Formula One because you get guaranteed conditions. It's a good track for testing, very high abrasive surface, decent of kind of variation of corners. It's become a better preferred option than Barcelona, where the weather could sometimes have been terrible and tyres are out of the window and endless complications. I think in terms of the race going forward, it's got a contract until 2026. I think the ball's very much in its kind of court about what it wants to do. Can it upgrade its facilities? Can it offer a financial package that makes it viable for Formula One to continue? We've seen with Imola and Monza at the moment, both are on the calendar. So just because F1 decided that Imola was a good thing to have on the calendar, it didn't mean that wasn't the death knell of Monza. And it's almost forced Monza's hand to make improvements. We saw recently they started resurfacing work, revamping of the kind of infrastructure, the tunnels, new paddock club facilities. So it suits F1's agenda to have these elements at play where races are kind of bouncing off each other and forcing others to improve. The question is, what is the calendar going to look like in 26? Are all the American races going to survive? Will there be more American races? Are there other countries that want to get on the calendar? Will some of the other European venues fall off the venue? I think there's a lot of factors at play, and we've got quite a while yet to sort it out. But I think the key thing is whether the money makes sense for Barcelona ultimately.
Do you see a world then where we could have 2 Spanish Grand Prix on the calendar? You've mentioned the Italian ones there, but is there space for two Spanish Grand Prix on the calendar?
I think there's space if the interest in Spain justifies it. I think any track that wants a race has to be fairly confident that it's going to fill the grandstands up and the spectator banks, because there's no interest in spending a fortune if no one's interested and it takes place in front of empty crowds. So I think the issue is where Formula One goes, where it's going in 26. Is this kind of the plateauing I think we're seeing of interest in Formula One based on Red Bull domination? Is that going to, if we get a closer season, Mercedes are up there, Ferrari are up there, Fernando Alonso's winning races, there's no reason why Spanish interest can't peak. It rolls on, and Spain's super interested, and it justifies 2 races. But if Fernando Alonso retires in the next 2 years, if Carlos Sainz doesn't keep going on and winning more races, will the Spanish fan interest be enough to justify 2 races? And I think that's the critical deciding factor. And if Barcelona's ready to stump up the extra cash.
The Spanish Grand Prix, it's switched locations many times before, and if we go back in time to 2013, the race was supposed to alternate between Barcelona and the Valencia street circuit, but this never came to pass. Do we think Madrid is set to be the bright new future for Formula One, or could it just be Valencia all over again?
Yeah, I think Valencia's the kind of the warning sign about these kind of the potential huge hype that goes. I mean, it's obvious that Fernando Alonso's return to the front, not winning races, but battling at the front in Formula One, has triggered this huge Spanish interest. We see Spanish TV figures are up, Spanish social media interest is up. They've just signed a new TV deal with Spanish broadcasters, so that interest is there, and it's clearly been the factor that has enticed the Madrid politicians to push forward with this race. So, jumping on the Fernando interest, and that exactly the same thing happened in Valencia. Seemed to be a great offering, was going to bring tons of audience and economic input into Valencia, but in the end, it unwound a bit. The race wasn't as popular as was hoped. The race, apart from that absolute barnstormer that Fernando won, the races weren't fantastically exciting in Valencia. And when the books didn't balance up, when the political landscape in Valencia changed, the race fell away. I went there a few years. We had a summer holiday in Spain, and we in Valencia and went down to the area. It's quite sad now seeing what was a state of the art Formula One track. It was derelict, everything broken, smashed up, litter everywhere, dog mess, struggling to pick out elements of the track. I think it's sad when things like that happen. And I think this is the thing that we should be mindful of about Madrid. That is this huge interest now based on the Fernando hype, based on the potential of where we're going. Is it going to last the duration? Does the political scene in Madrid change? Because if it doesn't get the interest, if they can't justify the economic benefit, and they're talking of I think 400 million euros of economic boost to the region based on this race. So if those figures don't come up, does it see out the 10 years or not? I think that's something we can't guarantee 100% right now.
I guess that's where Barcelona will see their opportunity. But thanks for all of that, John. And no doubt there will be more news about the Spanish Grand Prix to come out over the next few weeks, months, seasons. Thank you for watching, and make sure you stick around and hit the subscribe button. And also let us know your thoughts on the track layout in the comments below.